Okay, now this is a fantastic little tidbit, little piece of news or information, I guess you could say, about the Vancouver Canucks. Now, before we go over this video, big shout out over to Young Judd on Twitter, who posted a tweet about this that caught my attention yesterday, which kind of is the entire reason why I'm making this video here today. Now, I know Young Judd used to actually go by the name Judd Brackett is underrated, but Judd Brackett is no longer part of the Vancouver Canucks. He is now the main guy in Minnesota. Therefore, he's not really all too underrated anymore. So this guy, he just changed his name over to Young Judd. Thank you for the tweet, because it's a very interesting piece of information that I wanted to bring out here onto the channel today. Let's talk about how the Vancouver Canucks got free capital from the Washington Capitals. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I just said that. I didn't even think about that. No way. Yes, I was thinking about capital like assets, you know, like volume of things within the organization. The Vancouver Canucks got free capital from the Washington Capitals. That is amazing. I did not even think of that beforehand. That was on the spot. That was just completely off the cuff. Let's talk about how the Vancouver Canucks turned nothing into something with Washington, starting at the 2018 NHL Entry Draft. Now, our story takes place not on day 1 of the draft, but on day 2. The Vancouver Canucks held the 161st overall pick in the 6th round back in 2018, and guess what? They didn't use it. They traded this pick over to the Washington Capitals in exchange for the Capitals' own 6th round pick in 2018, which was 186th overall, and Washington's own 6th round pick in 2019. So a year later from when this trade was done, we wouldn't really get the solidified details until the 2019 draft. Before we go over onto the Washington side of things, let's just take a look at what Vancouver did with the 2 picks they acquired. So they traded away 161 for 186 and a 2019 6th. What they did with the 2018 6th round pick was they drafted a guy named Artyom Manukyan, who is a very interesting prospect. And if you've been following this Vancouver Canucks prospect series that we've been doing for quite some time now, you would have known that Artie Manukin, back when he was drafted, he was one of the top MHL point producers that league had ever seen. He had 105 points in 60 games played the previous season. Even though he is only 5'7", 154, he still made his way over to the KHL. He had been playing there and in the VHL for some time. Now, in this season's worth of play, he's got 5 games played and 0 points in the KHL, so it's not really great. But the Vancouver Canucks did draft him a while ago, and as a result, you know, a lot of Canucks fans are like, oh, this is a pretty interesting pick, you know? He produced so much in the Russian junior leagues, we just kind of have to keep our eyes out on this guy and see what he can do as his career goes forward. For Manukin, though, he hasn't really had himself an opportunity yet to show himself off at the North American level, either in the NHL in the preseason or in Utica or Abbotsford, maybe even the ECHL. He hasn't done that yet. He's been stuck over in the KHL, VHL, MHL systems, so I don't particularly know how long the Vancouver Canucks hold his rights for, but still, he is a 6th round Vancouver Canucks prospect drafted with a pick that was initially from the Washington Capitals. Even though Manukin is 23 years old, he isn't really on the particularly young side in accordance to the rest of the prospect pool. He's still a guy over here that we're talking about because he is involved in the trade. Now, the other player the Vancouver Canucks acquired in this little series over here was a 2019 draft pick that was used a year later. It was 180th overall, the Washington Capitals' own 2019 6th round pick. The Canucks used this pick to select Jack Malone out of the Youngstown Phantom system in the USHL. Now, Malone is another guy who has himself a pretty interesting profile. He's suiting up for Cornell University in the NCAA, where last season, or excuse me, 2 seasons ago, he had 8 points in 27 games played. He went back over to Youngstown in the USHL in 2020-2021, where he was under a point per game. So not really the best development in terms of the development curve, but it looks like Malone is going to be suiting up for Cornell again in 2021-2022. We'll see how exactly he's going to be able to do. He is a 20-year-old, 6'1", 190-pound right-wing center right-handed player who, like many of the USHL Vancouver Canucks picks that they usually end up getting, was seen with a really weird aura of hype. Not because he was particularly fantastic, but because the Vancouver Canucks have a track record of using their picks in the USHL on some pretty notable names. Adam Gaudette, Brock Besser with Judd Brackett, of course. Judd Brackett is underrated, by the way. And then you had yourselves guys like Aidan McDonough, and you had Jack Malone here too as well. There are a whole bunch of guys from the USHL that the Vancouver Canucks have had their way with in terms of development and drafting. And Malone was kind of the next in this little series. It's just his development curve has been so weird to follow. From the USHL to the NCAA, back to the USHL, over to the NCAA again. It's back and forth over here with Malone, but he still is indeed another one of these guys that the Vancouver Canucks drafted with the Washington Capitals picks. Now, why exactly are we even making this video? Well, because when the Vancouver Canucks traded their 161st overall pick in the 2018 draft to Washington for Washington's 186, which became Artyom Manukin, and Washington's 2019 6, which became Jack Malone, the Washington Capitals selected, with that 161st overall pick, Alex Kannok Leipert, who is a Thai right-handed defenseman. Yeah, that's right, he is Thai. He was born in Nakhon Ratchasima in Thailand, so that is really cool to see. 6 feet, 194, right-handed guy playing for the Vancouver Giants, so a lot of Canucks fans, hey, you're familiar with the WHL, you know who Kannok Leipert is. He's a guy who had made himself a pretty interesting profile for the Giants as their captain the previous few seasons. He had 18 points in 22 games played in 2020-2021, and guess what? He was drafted by Washington as a prospect in their system, and he is no longer there. Because the Washington Capitals, even though they drafted this guy 3 years ago, they used up the Vancouver Canucks pick to take this guy, they did not sign him. So he became a free agent. And what do free agents do when they're free agents and they're not belonging to any team? Hey, guess what? They sign places. Alex Kannok Leipert, a few days ago, signed a contract with the AHL's Abbotsford Canucks, putting him in the Vancouver Canucks organization by proxy. Now, this isn't a full-time NHL contract. He is not going to have the right to get called up to the Vancouver Canucks the way things stand right now. However, should the Vancouver Canucks actually want to play this guy in the National Hockey League, they would sign him to a regular contract, he would get called up, and that's how that process goes. It's kind of the same story you saw with Alex Burrows, where he signed a contract with the ECHL, eventually signed a contract with the AHL, and then eventually signed an NHL contract too. Alex Kannok Leipert is now part of the Abbotsford Canucks, and so if you trace everything back to that Vancouver Canucks Washington Capitals trade back at the 2018 NHL Entry Draft, the Vancouver Canucks turned their 161st overall pick, which the Washington Capitals used to select Kannok Leipert, into Artyom Manukin in 2018, Jack Malone in 2019, and then followed that up by, 3 years later, signing the player that the Washington Capitals used to draft with the Vancouver Canucks draft pick. The Canucks turned their own 6th into their own 6th, Washington's 6th in 2018, and Washington's 6th in 2019. Boom! Free draft picks, free capital, free prospects right there. The Vancouver Canucks have fleeced the Washington Capitals, and I know it's kind of unfair to say this is a fleecing because none of these guys are NHL players, nor are any of them going to be guaranteed NHL players in the long term. But still, when it comes to an asset management point of view, this is kind of what happens when you trade up in the draft like Washington did in 2018, and you select guys that just don't stick around. Now, it's not their fault that they picked a guy that they ended up letting go after a few years, but still, there are other players that might have been good enough to the point where in 2021 you might have said to yourselves, hey, we like him, let's keep him around, let's sign him to an entry-level deal and keep him, I don't know, in Hershey, or maybe give him a tryout in the preseason with our main Washington Capitals squad. So that's kind of our weird video topic here today. Artyom Manukin is a Vancouver Canucks prospect taken with a Washington pick. We have ourselves Jack Malone, who is also a Vancouver Canucks prospect, taken with a Washington pick. And now we finally have the piece of the puzzle that connects everything else. We have ourselves Alex Kannok Leipert, a Thai right-handed defenseman who is suiting up for Abbotsford and who was the Washington drafted pick that was initially acquired from the Vancouver Canucks. Talk to me in the comments, what do you think about this weird topic over here? I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much to Young Judd. Judd Brackett is underrated for the video topic here today. Social Trolls 99, and bye.